Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming a bit of a spring TBR video. I don't normally do strict monthly TBRs because I am very much a mood reader, but I thought it would be fun to do more of a seasonal TBR. Not that these books are specifically catered to springtime, but it's just kind of an idea of these are the books that are on my priority list, and these are the books that I would like to read sooner rather than later. I have kind of a mixture of physical books and a few Kindle books, as well as there's another physical book that's actually coming in the mail a couple days from now. It's March 30th, and I have a book that's going to be delivered on April 1st because it releases on April 1st. So I'll talk a little bit more about that book in a minute, but I'm going to start with my physical books on this list. So I'm kind of just going to get right into it. The first book that I am honestly probably going to start later today is Dragonfly in Amber by Diana Gabaldon. This is the second book in the Outlander series. I actually just realized while reading the little synopsis on the back that this one is actually set 20 years after the events in the first book, which I didn't know. So that's exciting. But I love, well, I can't say that I love the Outlander books because I've only read one so far, but I really loved the first one, and I am just kind of a sucker for anything that is set in Scotland or England. I love the way that things are described, and especially books like this that have the historical element to them too. It's just very interesting, and Diana Gabaldon does a wonderful job at just using descriptive language to tell her stories. And she's also very knowledgeable about the historical aspects. So there's a lot that's actually really historically accurate in her books too, which I love. So I think I'm going to start this one later today, but it doesn't look that thick, but these pages are so thin. Look how floppy this is. And look how many, there's just so many words on these pages. The next book that I have here is the first book in the Twilight series. This is my limited edition, special edition version, which is why it looks a little bit different. But I want to do another reread of the series. I know I had talked about doing a reread when I first got these books back in December, and I have not gotten to doing the reread yet. That's something that I want to start this spring at some point. I want to start the reread and go through the books and annotate the heck out of them. I might even do a reread the book and then watch the movie sort of thing. We'll see. I don't really think I have to talk about Twilight all that much because I feel at this point we all know what it's about. So I'm going to leave that on that note. The next book that I want to get to, and I'm not, this isn't in any sort of order whatsoever. This is just kind of, these are the books that I have at the top of my head that I can think of. But the next one is The Lies of Loch Lamora. I have seen a few people talking about this recently, and it just sounds so interesting. This is the first book. I think it's a trilogy, if I'm not mistaken. And it's kind of like a historical fantasy heist sort of story from what I understand. Let me just read the back for you because that'll probably make more sense. Book 1 of the Gentleman Bastard sequence. The Thorn of Camor. I'm probably going to pronounce some of these words horrifically wrong as well. The Thorn of Camor is said to be an unbeatable swordsman, a master thief, a friend to the poor, a ghost that walks through walls. Slightly built and barely competent with a sword, Loch Lamora is, much to his annoyance, the fabled Thorn. And while Loch does indeed steal from the rich, who else would be worth stealing from? The poor never see a penny. All of Locke's gains are strictly for himself and his tight-knit band of thieves, the gentlemen bastards. The capricious, colorful underworld of the ancient city of Camor is the only home they've ever known. It sounds like it's basically just a band of thieves, and they are working on staying alive in this war, and that's really all I know. I don't know much else about it. I have just seen a couple people talking about it. Most recently, I saw Katie is Reading talking about it, and she really enjoyed it. So I think, from what I understand, I think it's kind of a heist sort of story. But it sounds super interesting. I've had it on my shelves for a while, so I would love to get to this sooner rather than later as well. The next book that I have here is If It Bleeds by Stephen King. So this one is actually a collection of short stories that he has. I read the Mr. Mercedes trilogy last year, and then I also read The Outsider, which, like, the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, that's just its own trilogy, but there's a couple characters that Stephen King has written more books about. So one of them, her name is Holly. She's also a recurring character in The Outsider. So I read that one next. And then this book has a short story that includes her as well. And from what I understand, this should technically be read before reading Holly by Stephen King, which obviously also includes the character Holly. So they're not technically, like, other than the Mr. Mercedes trilogy that has to be read in order, the other books you don't technically have to read in order, but my, like, OCD needs to read things in the preferred order that I understand them. So yeah, this is the next one. It even says on the back, in the title story, so the short story in here that's called If It Bleeds, Holly Gibney from the Mr. Mercedes trilogy and The Outsider must face her fears and possibly another outsider, this time on her own. I don't know if I'm gonna read like all of the short stories all at once, but I at least want to read the one that has Holly in it so that at some point I can move on to reading her book, which I also have on my bookshelf. I love Stephen King's writing. I have so many of his books, none of which I've actually purchased myself. One of my friends whose hair I cut, every time I cut his hair, he doesn't pay me or anything, he just buys me books. And the majority of the time, he ends up buying me a Stephen King book. Stephen King is probably one of the largest, like, sections on my bookshelves. I think I own the most books from him. Like, he's the largest collection that I have from one author. I have quite a few from him that I have read. I also have quite a few on my shelf that I have not read yet, but I will be getting to at some point. So I think this is the next one on the list. The last physical book that I have with me currently is The Lovely War by Julie Berry. I've seen quite a few people talking about this. It is kind of a historical fiction with a little bit of like a fantasy-ish element to it almost. Let me read the back and then I'll tell you kind of what I've heard of it. In the perilous days of World War I and II, the gods held the fates and the hearts of 4 mortals in their hands: Hazel, James, Aubrey, and Colette. A classical pianist from London, a British would-be architect turned soldier, a Harlem-born ragtime genius in the U.S. Army, and a Belgian orphan with a gorgeous voice and a devastating past. Their story, as told by goddess Aphrodite, who must spin the tale or face judgment on Mount Olympus, is filled with hope and heartbreak, prejudice and passion, and reveals that though war is a formidable force, it's no match for the transcendent power of love. Obviously, it's about World War I and II, but when I say that it's got like a fantasy-ish element, like, I don't think there's any part of this that is fantasy, but just the fact that the story is being told by one of the Greek gods, or goddesses, I should say, Aphrodite, like, that aspect is sort of fantasy esque, if that makes sense. It sounds like a really interesting story. I love historical fiction and historical books in general, and I've heard really good things about this one in particular, and I think it's an interesting way to sort of spin it, having it being told by a goddess. So I'm interested to see how that plays a role in things. The next book that I have on my list is the one that is being released on April 1st, so I don't have it in my hands yet, but that is Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. Now, I really have no idea what this book is about, but Jessa Hastings is basically an auto-buy author for me at this point. I have loved every single book that she has ever written thus far, so Conditions of Will was just the next one. But let me read the synopsis here. London-based Georgia Carter, professional lie detector and body language savant, has long been estranged from her infuriating, close-minded, wealthy South Carolina family. After a falling out years ago, the chasm runs deep between the black sheep, Georgia and her gay alcoholic brother, and their parents and elder siblings. But when their father dies suddenly, Georgia returns to the States for the funeral, where she comes face to face with Sam Penny, her brother's AA sponsor. Amid the tensions, dramas, and revelations of the family reunion, Georgia and Sam are instantly drawn to each other. However, Georgia's brother also harbors feelings for Sam, and the last thing Georgia wants to do is hurt the only family she's ever really had. When their father's will reveals a surprising bequest to a mysterious stranger, Georgia's ability to read other people becomes crucial in unraveling her father's hidden past. So, sounds like it's gonna be typical Jessa Hastings fashion with being dramatic as heck. But I have also heard from Jessa Hastings herself that this book is different from her other books in the sense that the main character, Georgia, is a very well-adjusted and emotionally mature character. So that is, if you've ever read any of Jessa Hastings' books, that is completely different from any of her other characters. So I'm interested to see how that affects the storytelling and what is going to happen. The next couple books that I have are books that I have on my Kindle. So the first one is that I would like to finish Long Way Down by Krista and Becca Ritchie. I'm literally like 80-something% through already, so I just need to finish the last little bit. It is the 9th book in the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series. So this is the last one that sort of centers around the same time period, I guess. And then the 10th and final book is the epilogue novel called Some Kind of Perfect. And I'd also like to read that book at some point in the next couple months here. So I want to finish the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series. And I think Some Kind of Perfect is set like 10 years in the future with all the characters that we've grown to love in the past 9 books. And it also includes their kids that they've had, and they're obviously a little bit older now. And the last book that I have on my list, I also have it on my Kindle, but it is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have read the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang and absolutely loved it. I've been intimidated to read Babel? I don't actually know how it's pronounced. But I've been intimidated to read it because I've heard that it's quite, like, academic. But it just sounds like such a my vibe sort of thing. And it's set at Oxford University. And why do I just love anything that's set at, like, Oxford or Yale or Harvard or any of those sort of, like, super prestigious universities? It sounds super interesting. I really don't know all that much about it. You probably have gotten the vibe already, but I tend to go into books kind of blind. Sometimes these summaries on the back of books, or like knowing too much about them, spoils things for me, and I like to just go into them blind. If someone recommends a book to me and they just say it's a great book and they don't tell me anything else, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I'll read it. So yeah, that's the final book that is kind of on the top of my priority list. Obviously, I will end up reading far more books than just these in the next few months, but these are all the ones that I would like to get to sooner rather than later. That is it for my little spring TBR video. I kept it nice and short and sweet. If you have any other recommendations for me, if there's any books that you guys have on your spring or April TBRs, I would love to hear about them. Leave a comment down below and I will probably take a look at any books that you recommend to me. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.